Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for our panel From Bora Bora to Monet's Gardens in Giverny, the influence of nature and travel on design. First, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Eleanor Schrader. Eleanor Schrader of Los Angeles is an award-winning architectural and interior design historian who lectures worldwide on the history of architecture, interiors, furniture, and decorative arts. She has been named a distinguished instructor by UCLA Extension, where she teaches the history of architecture and interior design in the Architecture and Interior Design program. She has done graduate work in fine and decorative arts at Sotheby's Institute in London and New York, and also holds an MBA from Loyola Marymount University. Her company, LA Architecture and Art Tours, hosts travel tours in the United States and abroad, specializing in historic architecture, and I've been on them and they're fabulous. So Eleanor, at this point, until our next tour when we can travel, let's take it away.
That sounds good. Thank you so much, Christine, and to you and your staff and all these lovely panelists for putting all this together. And we're all very excited to be here, and we hope to inspire everybody to travel once they let us out of here. So I'd love to introduce my panelists here. John Feldman, a native of Los Angeles, is a landscape architect practicing for over 26 years. He founded Ecocentrics in 2006. Before beginning his professional career, John embarked on an extensive overseas study program traveling throughout China and Southeast Asia, which informs most of his design today. He honed his skills in design while at the firm Nancy Gosley Power and Associates. His projects include commercial, retail, museum, and institutional, public open spaces, residential gardens, and estate master planning spanning many countries around the world. So yay, John. All right. And then I'd like to introduce Sandra Block as an architect of contemporary architectural design, who is now working as an artist. Sandra Block's focus is to engage people in a shared experience, capturing an authentic sense of place, context, and narrative. Sandra views the integration of fine art and architectural elements as a natural evolution of that vision, one that enables her to design evocative steel sculptures that inspire memorable experiences and create unique environments for social gathering, quiet reflection, and visual delight. And her work is so beautiful, so I can't wait for all of you to hear about it. And then Mark Weaver, his Italian heritage has greatly influenced his love of history, architecture, and antiques. His interest in travel and culture takes him abroad, searching for the rare and unusual. Mark Weaver and Associates was founded by Mark over 40 years ago and is widely known as one of the most prestigious design firms in the country. He is a founding member of the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art, a member of the Decorative Arts Council for LACMA, and a patron of the Los Angeles Opera. And I need to add one of the favorite guest speakers I have in my UCLA class. They all love him. So thank you, Mark, for being here. And then Wade Wiseman, he is the founder and principal of Wade Wiseman Architecture, and he has spent the last 20 years designing classically inspired estates of many genres around the world. He loves to travel and even draws inspiration for his upcoming projects, a whole hotel project in Nashville from a trip to Italy. Wade Wiseman Architecture has offices in Wade's hometown of Milwaukee, as well as offices on the East and West coasts. Currently, he is working on projects across the country, including Beverly Hills, Montecito, Miami Beach, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. On all projects, he believes wholeheartedly that a collaborative approach to design always yields the greatest results. So Wade, thank you so much for being here today. And so we'd like to impart some of our knowledge to all of you. And Christine, jump in if you've got anything that you want to add as well. So I thought I'd throw out the question to Wade first. What are your two favorite destinations of all the places you have traveled, domestic or otherwise?
Well, I think Paris is probably the top of my list. I think Rome and or somewhere in Tuscany like Siena might be my second.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a fondness for a little place in northern Wisconsin that I keep a little cabin in. And so traveling to these places is always inspiring.
Oh, great. Well, and then Mark, I know that you're a worldwide traveler. It's almost like a religion to you. Of all the various places you visited in Italy, what site stays at the top of your mind? What most inspires you?
Well, that's tough because I don't think I've been anywhere in Italy that I wasn't wild about. But I guess if I was to select two, because I love architecture, I'd have to say Rome, the history, and it's a wonderful place. And perhaps secondly would be Venice, because I think it's possibly the most magical place on the planet. It's just very unique and special. And there are two places that as I travel in Italy, I always seem to go back to them.
Oh, that's wonderful. We're jealous and we want to go with you next time.
Right.
All right. Sandra, you currently have 1 foot planted on the East Coast, Connecticut in particular, and 1 foot firmly planted in La Quinta. So tell us how both of those destinations have inspired your wonderful fire vessel sculptures. And we want to hear more about these fire vessel sculptures too.
Oh, wow. It's a big shift from a water-centric place on the coast of Connecticut to being in the desert. And I find it really challenging and intriguing to be part of that natural environment. I guess I find that traveling, even as an architect, I always look to nature as an inspiration. And so the pieces that I'm creating really reflect where I am.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. And then John, I know that your special place is Japan and also Bali. And tell us about the art of Japanese gardens and which ones have inspired you to borrow those aesthetics and take them right home with you.
Right. You know, I once heard it said that you probably couldn't visit all of the Japanese gardens, even just in Kyoto, in a lifetime. I can't imagine that's true, but I haven't hit them all yet, and I've been back 6 times. So there's hundreds. And so, you know, not to be too cliche, but I think that the gardens at Ryoanji particularly resonate with me. There's a cleanness of form and plane and things that translate more to our contemporary work, but harken back to historical precedent and the detailing and less a literal translation, but really the spirit of place and how that informs and infuses, I think, our work on the whole.
Yes. And you captured it perfectly, the spirit of the place, and how do you translate that into design? That's great. Christine, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Where's your favorite places?
Oh my gosh, my favorite places. Well, I just got back from actually London and Tuscany. That was
Oh,
September, before anybody ever dreamed we couldn't do it all the time, you know? It was extraordinary. It was beautiful. It was rainy and atmospheric and divine. So I would have to say, I think London's one of my all-time favorite places. And of course, anything on the East Coast.
yes, absolutely. We're all pining to go out, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes, on one of your tours, in fact.
Yes. All right. That sounds great. Well, London's one of my favorite places too. So, you know, especially since I live there and I have so much inspiration from there. And of course, Paris, we have a lot of inspiration from. So those would probably be my 2 favorite places. All right. Well, Wade, you have a new book, Heirloom Houses, and that's really captured the attention of a lot of house lovers everywhere. Tell us about how the early homes of the East Coast would have influenced your own work and how you create such an amazing sense of warmth and timeless beauty in your work.
Thank you. Well, I think it just boils down to things that, as I experience them, they sort of etch into my brain and they sort of fill, you know, my imagination. And I wonder, you know, who built them and who are the craftspeople and who directed the work. And there's a timelessness about that I see generation after generation after generation occupying these magnificent buildings. And I realized, you know, how incredibly dynamic they are, that they can endure all this time and still be, you know, useful and loved. And so those are the things that I really wanted to leave behind my life as my professional career began to unfold. I really began to think, you know, I could do anything here. I'm the person in charge. What do I want to leave? And I want to leave something that's going to be loved and have it be something that's timeless forever.
And that makes my heart sing because I'm an historian. And so this is what I always decry when things are torn down. And so I'm so happy to hear that. And I have to pick up a copy of your book now because you got me all excited about what you just said. So thank you. Now, when Mark comes to talk to my UCLA extension class, I'm always bugging him to bring in antiques into the class and talk about them because it's so important for people to travel and for my students to travel. And so, Mark, I'd like if you would tell me a little bit more about some of the Italian works, which I know you've brought in class, the ones that you'd like to bring home and live with forever.
Well, I guess if I could have anything, I'd love a Canaletto painting. I'd love a sculpture by Canova, and probably any antiquity from Pompeii or Herculaneum. So, but obviously these are not pieces that I can own. There's no way you can purchase those things today. So you know, when I'm shopping, whether it's for myself or for a client, I'm always looking for something that's unusual and beauty. So certain pieces of furniture, art are purchasable today. But I just recently was on a trip, or last year, in Pompeii and Herculaneum, and I discovered a foundry who has just made some things which I'm going to be using in my own new home, which Wade happens to be designing for me. And thank you, Wade. And so we just had 2 figures that were reproduced from the Naples Archaeological Museum, and they're bronzes which are going to go in the garden. And so I look for things that are a little bit unusual, that have character. I love things that have historical reference. And these are things of beauty. And today, the thing that's very exciting is that these things are being reproduced from the Naples Archaeological Museum with digital technology. And the accuracy of the reproductions is perfect. So those are probably my favorite things that I would probably bring. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Christine, have you stuck anything in your purse on your travels?
As much as possible, yeah. I haven't been arrested yet, which is great. No, I wish I could. No, I fall in love with everything I see in the museums, and I'll take pictures of my friends and so on in front of these beautiful things that I'd give anything to take home. But
oh, yes.
You can go see them. They're like friends you see. It's I mean, photographs are affordable, but the memories you go back to again and again.
Yeah, my photo is up in the Getty guard room up at the Getty Brentwood because I got a little bit too close to a piece now, and they have been following me forever. But some of those commodes will not fit in my purse, but all my students have told me on the last day of my retirement, which will be the day before I die, there's one particular piece, French piece at the Getty to, you know, back the truck up and run.
Eleanor, it's always suspicious when you arrive at the Getty with a screwdriver and a wrench. You know.
Oh my gosh, yes. All right. Well, Sandra, now I know that you visit Cape Cod quite a bit, and for those who haven't visited, I mean, it's just such a beautiful place. How does that coastal community and its wildlife come together in your work?
Well, one thing comes to mind, a piece that I did in Falmouth, Massachusetts. This is the Cape, the heart of the Cape, where Woods Hole is. And this piece, as a fireball, was intended to reflect its setting, which is Oyster Pond. It overlooks the Vineyard Sound. Wow. And the environment there is all about these great blue herons and dragonflies. This is what I see when I'm there. I was just trying to take in this environment. Lily pads, wild irises. It was just kind of a remarkable place to be. And so I sketched these things as kind of like a scene, a little vignette, and translated that onto a steel canvas. And I think that what is exciting for me in being in these unique places, and they're exotic. I mean, if you live in Arizona someplace and you've never been to the Cape, it is an exotic place and remarkable. I look for these details, the things that really make a place come to life and are memorable. And so it's an opportunity to bring nature, to connect people to that specific place, to nature, and even to bring nature inside. I do a lot of work that is for exterior, outdoor living spaces, but also whether it's a fire screen or something that resides in an interior, you feel that you could be no place else.
And that's so important in design, is the influence of nature. So thank you for that. And then speaking of that, John, we've talked about your favorite region in Japan, or your favorite garden as well. Do you have any other places in Japan that are must-sees, or perhaps in Bali that are must-sees for you?
Yeah, it's really hard to throw a dart and just land on one. You know, you want to take the the whole fistful and see them all. Yeah, my experience in Bali was back when I was in the early 90s, back in college, but it made such a strong impression that I would say that carries through to our work. Say for our hillside work, we particularly think of ourselves in complex hillside work as that's really our sweet spot. So be that really how to transition and offer more auxiliary spaces from the interiors to the exteriors. And often those, the amenities will include decks and lookouts and borrowed views, but specifically infinity pools. And so it's really the infinity pool, in my mind, that with its various basins that are activated and animated, that remind me somewhat of the rice paddy terraces that I remember in such tranquil spaces. And it's just as much it's not the literal translation, obviously, and they're more rectilinear by form, but it's the quality of those spaces. It's the auditory, it's smell, it's sweeping breezes. But I realize too, and I always tell our clients this is not, I don't get to live here at the end of the day. I'm lucky if I get invited back for the part, for the opening party, let alone step foot later on somehow and we build friendships. But this is about our clients. So it's a shared experience. It's a buy-in, and hopefully they've had the opportunity to bring their travels and what's important, what's valued to them to this, rather than our laying ego and overlaying this 35-year past experience on them with some major trip. So.
Exactly. It looks like you have Mount Fuji in the background.
That's my friend. Yeah.
Yay! And tell me what all these.
Design.
Go ahead, Christine.
I said I think you should take credit for the design.
I think so too. And what are all these fabulous pink blossoms behind you? Just bring those over to my house.
Right. I couldn't tell you specifically. They do have a botanical and a common name. But what this reminded me of is the travels. So the college was one thing, and then more in professional life, that was what led me to travel 6 times to Japan. I had a dozen jobs in my earlier career, but these would be train rides. So I remember seeing flower fields from the train from Narita Station to Osaka and beyond, and again, very, very memorable. So.
It's like the lavender fields and the sunflower fields in the south of France. It's so beautiful. Thank you. Wade, you're also working on a remarkable classic hotel in Nashville, which is going to reflect the world of musicians. Now, how'd that one start? How was, evidently there's a connection with medieval villages here. This sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's yes, and in certain abstractions, yes, absolutely. Well, there was an opportunity that came across my desk a couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, to envision a hotel paired with a music venue that would become sort of a stopping ground for the various artists that are sort of enrich Nashville, and really, music is really kind of centered in Nashville. Musicians and the writers and the people that are really making music happen. They're the ones that sort of occupy Nashville and play all over the place. And so this seemed like a very interesting opportunity, but the site was interesting as well. It was literally this huge 300-foot rock of limestone that sits above one of the southern suburbs. And so when I went to look at this property and, we were talking about tucking this hotel in, the owner of the land said, well, give me a vision for the whole hillside. And so it's 20 acres. And so I came up literally with the community that surrounded this hotel. But I was inspired by Tuscan hill towns, because about 4 years ago, I rented a villa in Tuscany for a fairly long period of time, about 4 weeks, and traveled in and out of there. And so I just kept visiting one of these hill towns after another, which, essentially dot the region. And what I loved about the experience of these hill towns was that, obviously for defensive purposes, they were built up at the top. But as you ascended, you would essentially go around this town before you got to the wall. And then, the whole town was essentially this very, sort of dense, built up little urban village on these towns. And what I loved about them is that you would find people on the uphill side of these towns would carve into their backyards and make these little grottos and wine caves and things. And then you'd look across the road down through an alleyway and you'd see this magnificent vista of the Tuscan landscape below you. And I thought, what an intriguing experience, so rich, so wonderful, and so much about inside and outside and how those work together. And those are things that I've always been fascinated with. And so this hotel compound and little community was really inspired by Tuscan villages.
Wow, that is so fascinating. We've all really been thinking a whole lot more about how we want to live and design now as we're, locked down a little bit more. And that is so interesting. Thank you, Wade. I hope you've got some pictures of it you can show us soon.
Yeah, well, when it gets under construction and it gets actually with the virus and everything, things have been a little sluggish on the business side.
Yeah.
But keeping the vision intact, hopefully this will happen. But I'm excited about it.
Do we need to bring rolling carts and donkeys and wenches with us to come visit there? Okay.
I actually think that would be great. We should get some miniature Sicilian donkeys to take us around.
Oh, that'd be great. I love it. Mark, kind of piggybacking on the question that I asked you just a few minutes ago, that you do fill your clients' homes with rare artifacts and historic decorative arts pieces. Can you kind of walk through one of your homes of what you have included? I mean, this could even include your own home of how you've designed around these pieces you've picked up traveling.
Well, one project comes to mind. It's a project that we completed 2 or 3 years ago in Montecito. And the clients are very dear friends and also avid collectors. And I've been working with them for a little over 30 years. And we travel all over the world looking for interesting things. And they're more interested in collecting unusual and beautiful things. And not everything has to match and go together. It's a collection of spectacular pieces. So, just for instance, in their living room, the fireplace is a 17th century stone fireplace. It's French. There's a game table in the room that's from the 1920s. It's a Roulemont table made of rosewood and shagreen. There's a pair of Han Dynasty figures that we had French mounted into lamps. We found a pair of Portuguese consoles that flank the fireplace that are very powerful and just absolutely beautiful. So those sort of anchor that into the room. The coffee table we found at auction, and it was by Royer from the 1930s. And you know, we had a pair of lamps that are contemporary, but they're done by an Italian artist and they're a limited edition. So we bought 2 of those for the living room. So it's a collection of really sort of rare and unusual pieces, but they're all spectacular. They're all, there's texture to them. It's a combination of materials from bronze and rich woods and stone. And even the fabric on the sofas, I found an antique fabric and found a mill who would reproduce it. And it was a fabric from the 1920s. So we had the fabric for the sofas reproduced so that it was something unique. So it was a real thrill. And of course, not every project you get to do is that special, but this was probably one of my most favorite projects.
Great, I love it. Thank you. And then just seeing so many of your slides and your work, it's just, it's fabulous. Thank you. Sandra, you're also a frequent visitor to Bermuda. So tell me what you love about the place and especially the sea life in the area, how that has inspired your work.
Well, I have spent a great deal of time in Bermuda, including an artist in residency a year ago. I think what is so spectacular about Bermuda are the things that you don't see. And one of the, someone just mentioned about the shared experience. The image behind me is Castle Point and Castle Harbor. And I designed these 2 fire screens. See if I can move myself a bit. You can see them. And the reason they're set in water is because I really wanted to make the point that this connection between this natural scene that I imagined and then fashioned out of steel and the connection to place. And so this is really a very personal design for someone who has just a deep love of the sea life of Bermuda, specifically these sea turtles that have created this extraordinary habitat and seagrass and other beautiful exotic fish and things that fall beneath the surface of this incredible turquoise blue water. And so this is it's a bit of a fantasy set of images of the life of the sea turtle in Bermuda. The other things that have fascinated me above the surface are the iconic long-tailed birds. Things that if you are either Bermudian or you really pay attention, you really don't see, at least I'm not aware of, seeing these birds anywhere else. And to me, they create a whole nother world that is in the atmosphere. And this I just find so intriguing. How do I interpret that artistically to create like a 3-dimensional diorama almost of these birds in flight? It is an exotic place, you know, in and of itself, but back to the idea of connecting to place and creating a memorable relationship between the viewer and the art is really what I'm looking for.
Love that. You know, again, the nature and as an influence is just everything. Thank you. John, I understand you are currently completing a residential project here in Los Angeles that conveys a little bit of the Pacific Northwest and at the same time a little bit of Bali. That sounds really like it takes a lot of imagination, which I know that you've done so successfully. So tell us some more about how you're doing this.
Yeah, it sounds a little disparate, doesn't it? It's, so we were invited to the party early on, and we're actually at the end of the design phase. So I can't wait in a couple of years to see this come to fruition. It's a rather large home. It's in La Cañada, Flint Ridge area on 1.5 acres. And our client had, again, invited us to the party with the idea of transforming the site portion of this and marrying that with the architecture. And the inspiration that she very carefully curated for us was Balinese. So lots of infinity pools, outdoor spaces, set over in jungle settings. So what's unique to her property is that she has a good 25 heritage oaks on this acre and a half, which again, these are native, not to be touched. You have to be very careful to lace and work within. And this begets the opportunity to start looking at floating decks and systems and hovering pathways to traverse through the landscape, and with some inkling to develop a vineyard. So the vineyard is again this not so literal translation of terraced rice paddies that one might see, but yet an expression that is appropriate to a landscape and a climate and regional appropriateness here. So it's taking elements of and floating decks, and again, have to have the infinity pool and all the other little experiences that hang off of that, like saddlebags, if you will. But really adorned in materials that are appropriate, that feel regionally appropriate, even if they come from a Mediterranean clime or a cladded spill walls in Italian stone that feel regionally appropriate, as opposed to something that's more indicative of the air of Bali or India, or some kind of curated stone from those areas. So that's the bridging. It's having those amenities that are regionally appropriate, that marry with the interiors and the exterior of this, more kind of farmhouse, if you will, board and batten, weathered home, and all comes together seamlessly. So.
How long will it be before we can see pictures of it?
We hope to have some 3D action very, very soon. We tend to do that early in the project because we can't wait to see it. And we know that it'll be, once we're through the city and all the logistics with that, that it'll be easily a 24 to 30 month construction.
Okay, good. It sounds wonderful. I haven't wrapped my head around it yet, so I'm really interested to see what you're doing on that. Yes, thank you. Okay. Now, Wade, you've got a lot of offices around the country, and most recently opened up one in Santa Barbara. What made you choose that region? And I'm sure the coastal beauty and other projects that you have there. Can you talk a little bit more about your area, your office in Santa Barbara?
Sure. Well, it chose me, actually. Santa Barbara definitely chose me. I was fortunate enough to have a client from Chicago that purchased a piece of property in Ventura County, in the sort of farm areas that are near Moore Park, and they were creating. They wanted me to look at an old residence on a farm that they purchased to renovate, and it needed a lot of work, and there were a lot of code violations and things, but ended up getting this commission. And like any project, we're always sort of professing how much collaboration is important, and obviously the projects in California, especially with a large amount of property, require a lot of consultants. But the collaborative effort that started taking place between our office and the offices of the people that were locally rooted was very, very good. And we started getting referrals for other work. And so one of those was an incredible historic renovation project in Montecito. And while we were working on the project, the first few months, we were able to work out of the job trailers. But the project grew and continued to get very sophisticated to the point where we needed to have our own office space. And so we took this office space. Here we all of a sudden ended up in California with two magnificent projects, working simultaneously. And so really California kind of chose us. I hate to say it, but Santa Barbara really chose us, and it was so easy to fall in love with. I mean, the quality of light and the beauty and everything about it, the architectural heritage, the fabric, the ocean, the light. I mean, you really can't find a more enchanted place.
How lucky for you to have it there. That's so wonderful. There's just a magicness about Santa Barbara. Thank
Well, I'm
you.
working with my favorite client now is this wonderful interior designer named Mark Weaver.
Yeah, we all like him. He's pretty.
Wait another 3 months, Wade.
And come back and tell us that, several months from now, Wade. Yes, we'll have another panel. I was on another panel with Wade at, I think I was at the Pacific Design Center, and you had the most, which I won't make you repeat now, but one of your clients that did not do so well with you, and it was just giving you such a hard time. And I will personally guarantee Mark will behave. He's such a gentleman.
I have the antidote to that. I am now my own client.
Ah.
Oh yeah, it's sort of fun. You mentioned La Quinta, and I have to explain because some people would say, well, why La Quinta? Why from Connecticut to La Quinta? I'm actually, even though the image here is Bermuda, I'm actually in Newport Beach, just temporarily, but trying to kind of figure my way around Southern California. But being my own client came up as an opportunity to work on a piece of property, which is an old California ranch, to transform it into an event and private retreat space. So now I get to be both architect and artist in this one fell swoop. But it's pretty fascinating to, as we're talking about materials and methods and having an appreciation for an authentic architecture. It's all sort of coming into play in this one place for me.
I was going to ask you about this, Sandra, of who your favorite client might be, a potential client, but it sounds like your own favorite client.
Oh, well, I don't know if I'm my own favorite client, but I've been really very, very fortunate, even though my father would say to me, never make friends with your clients. I never quite understood that. I was quite lucky to have some great experiences. Actually, one thing comes to mind in Sun Valley, Idaho, which I had never been to before until this project presented itself as an architectural commission. But that was also probably the most collaborative experience in designing a home for that location.
Nice, nice. Do you encourage your clients to travel to get some ideas to bring to you, or it just comes naturally because they have traveled?
That's a bit hard to answer. I certainly encourage a great deal of dialogue where I can help to translate ideas or favorite places into something which is very personal and appropriate to wherever this will be. But I will say that architecture can also be the art of fantasy. And especially with smaller structures like pool houses or other things where why not? Why does it have to sort of follow suit? It's an opportunity to explore and have some fun and actually a sense of travel outside of your own backyard.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the joys of Southern California is it is one big fantasy architectural landscape.
Right, that's true.
That's very polite, Eleanor.
Yeah, it's kind of one of everything.
Yes.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Mark, I know that you also love Portugal. So what's inspired you in traveling there, and how this has come to inspire you with your clients or even your own work on your own home?
Well, Portugal really is it's just a wonderful country. Somebody asked me what appeals to you about Portugal. Well, it has a very relaxed lifestyle. The climate is very much like California. The terrain is very California. And I just found the lifestyle, the culture, the people are just delightful. There's so much beauty in Portugal. It's a very relaxed country. And unfortunately, right now, the economy is suffering. It's very easy to travel throughout Portugal. But a friend of mine who lives just outside of Lisbon had made a list of places for me to visit. And I was working in Portugal about 3 or 4 years ago. And I literally took his list of recommendations and started visiting these various sites. And if I can, I'd just like to bring up two of them that stick out in my mind. So one is, and I don't know how to pronounce this properly because I don't speak Portuguese, but it's the Quinta de Regalera. And it's a Portuguese Renaissance style palace in Sintra. And Sintra is north of Lisbon. And I went there to see the palace. Fred and I were just walked over there, and we thought we'd take an hour tour through the place, and spent almost 4 hours touring this palace. And then the next day we wanted to go see the gardens because we were so enchanted with the gardens. And the gardens actually eclipse the house. And the house is sort of a hodgepodge of different styles, but the garden is fantastic. It's a series of grottos and lakes and tunnels, and it has a monumental staircase that goes down 30 meters. And this place was designed by one of the Knights Templar. So there are all these references to the Rose Cross Order, and they built in Sandra, you're into nature. It's one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever had. You're going through tunnels and grottos, and these were places to hide from the Catholic Church, who was persecuting.
I love the whole story is great.
Yeah.
Just the history of it is so incredible. So that was pretty great, and I've sent a lot of people there because it's just one of those special places. And then secondly, and anybody who has an appreciation for art or architecture would love this, is the Montserrat Palace. And it's a palatial villa that's also near Sintra. And Sintra was the summer resort for the Portuguese court. It's in the foothills overlooking the Atlantic. And I think construction was started in about 1863. And the design for Montserrat was influenced by Romanticism and Moorish Revival architecture, and it has neo-Gothic elements. And again, the setting, it's the gardens around it are a little bit are a little bit wild. I don't think the government has the money to restore the gardens, but you can see what the gardens initially intended, and they're absolutely spectacular. But the house and the palace itself is a combination of architectural styles. There's one room that has a dome ceiling that looks like it's carved out of marble. It looks like lace. And you can go online and look up Montserrat Palace in Sintra. It's one of the most spectacular buildings I've ever seen. The refinement in the architecture, just the beauty, the color of materials used. So those are two places that I would love to go back and visit. And I recommend, if people are traveling to Portugal, to take the time and go visit them, because whether you are interested in gardens or architecture or history, it's all there.
Gosh, we're coming with you, Mark. Just booking a flight right now. Christine, how are we doing on time?
Very well. As a matter of fact, a couple of questions have come in. So whenever you're ready, Eleanor, you either can ask another one, or I can roll into a couple of questions.
There was just one more that I wanted to ask of Wade, and you're a member of the Design Leader Network, and you recently went to London. So anything that especially impressed you?
Well, it was my inaugural trip with this group, and I couldn't have had a better time. I mean, seriously, it was really remarkable. And of course, London as a host city, wow, they have the ability to connect, the members, with extraordinary experiences in places that you wouldn't be able to go to as a tourist, or you wouldn't be able to experience the same way. So they had a cocktail party one night at Kensington Palace. It's one thing to go on a tour and, point out the various points of interest in a room, but it's another thing to be, sitting there, sipping a glass of champagne, talking to all the people that you love and idolize in your profession. It was a really extraordinary experience. yeah, it's definitely something that is now become a high point of my years. Looking forward to this sort of, you know, next travel destination, which this year is supposed to be Mexico City, and I think we're still up in the air, but I think it's still on.
Fingers crossed it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. All right. Christine, yes, why don't we go ahead and take some of these questions then?
Okay, all right, we've got about 10 minutes left. So this came in, this one's from Mark. Mark, somebody had read your story about that incredible residential yacht that you've designed called The World. And they wanted to ask about the art of designing at sea. And I seem to have lost Mark.
Probably on his yacht.
I guess he didn't like that question, Christine.
Mark, you hit your camera again?
Maybe he'll come back.
Until he comes back. Until he comes back.
Okay, I come back. Okay.
Next one came from you. All right. Somebody had asked about your artistry, and they said they saw that fabulous story in California Homes about, you know, showing you by the fireballs, and they asked how those are actually illuminated, because it seemed like a very good social distancing art piece because they're quite large.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They wanted to know how you illuminate them and how big they actually are, you know, for families to sit around and get warm by, that kind of thing.
Okay, well, the pieces are repurposed steel mooring buoys, so they come in just these 3 sizes, and 28 inches, 40 inches, and 58 inches in diameter. So the first ones that I made were wood burning, and this was absolutely a fire hazard. I mean, it's just, you know, explosive looking. And so I've started to work with propane burner assemblies that sort of keeps it exciting but under control. And because the burner assembly, it sits on essentially like I'll call it a steel grate to keep it level. It doesn't touch the perimeter of the steel, so the shell never gets hot. And so you can actually put your hands around it. It's just warm, but it delivers the same dramatic fire element that is like flypaper. I mean, people just want to cluster around it, and it's just a very social experience without creating any concern for safety. And certainly the large pieces just kind of automatically keep people at a particular distance. But one thing that I've really thought about, especially now, is that we're not looking for anything beyond physical distancing. That's what's going to keep us safe. The social distancing is something that we can manage, and that we all want to be together. We want to gather. And so whatever we're doing in terms of outdoor experience should encourage this social connection.
I agree. Thank you. That's well answered. Mark, this question, I'm going to go back to you. So you designed a gorgeous residential floating yacht called The World.
Yeah.
The question was, what did you do with the interior? Did you do something that was a departure from what you would classically think of as a nautical interior? And what did you do with it? And is each particular residence on there a little bit unique?
Yes, we've done 5 different residences on the ship, and each one is different. So one of my clients, who is from here in Malibu, every residence that we do for them is they have a color scheme that they like. They're comfortable with one particular look. So we gave them something a little more original, but kept their color scheme of blue and white that they like. I would say each one is a little different, with different materials. So I don't, on that close quarters, I don't want things to look cookie cutter, and I don't want them to look similar. So each one is rather unique. 2 of the couples were from California, and they wanted things very light and fresh and airy. One of them was a collection of some Art Deco pieces, and we reproduced the woodwork in the galley and in the bedroom and dressing area, or have Art Deco references to them. So yeah, each one is unique, and I don't want anything to look like we just did skied A or B. So it was a lot of fun to do, and of course you're limited on certain, you have certain restrictions as to what you can do on board. So that dictates a little bit of the materials you choose.
Great, thank you, thank you. There is one more question that I was going to ask Eleanor, unless you have one more you want to.
I'm good. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is for Wade and for Mark. Rumor has it you're working on a project together in Montecito, one of your residences. Can you give us a sneak preview of how that might be transformed? It's an
Gee,
existing
which one's
home in
that?
Montecito.
We're working, yeah, we're working on a couple there.
Yeah.
This is the one that I think, Mark, is your home to be.
Oh, okay. Well, as you know, I lost my previous home in the mudslides there 3 years ago. And about a year ago, I purchased a new residence and thought I would do just a minor remodel. And then after living there for a few months, I realized this place needs a lot more help than I originally anticipated. And Wade was kind enough to offer his professional help and assistance. And we love working together. So Wade and his team have been instrumental in helping me redesign and plan on rebuilding the house. We're keeping the existing footprint, but we're rebuilding it and restyling it, updating it. It's essentially going to be a new structure.
Right. Okay. So
and his whole team is so terrific.
Thank you, Mark. It's because you are so you're so thoughtful about each piece of the house and the way you live in the house, how you think of it being furnished, how you want to step outside, how you want to live there, how you want to entertain there. You're looking for, the house to, spark your imagination. And so it's such a collaborative effort. And my team is very inspired, obviously, by working with someone who can see all of the components of this project being important and synergistic. It's not just the architecture, it's not just the interiors, it's not just the landscape. It's all of those things and how they work together. And when we go over, when I'm in California, we'll share a meal typically on a weekend, and Mark and Fred will host, and we'll walk outside, and we'll sit and watch the sun on the mountain peaks behind the house, and it's so magical. I mean, it's just an incredible piece of property. So this is really a joy. It's these are the kinds of projects that you really kind of professionally live to work on.
Sounds really wonderful. Well, we are out of time practically at this point, and I want to thank everybody for taking us on this extraordinary tour around the world at a time when we can't really do that. It was so fun. Eleanor, that was a really beautiful job moderating too. Thank you so much for joining us. You were the perfect moderator with all your travel.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thanks to all the panelists too. This was just delightful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Bye.
Happy trails, happy travels.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.